Hark the bardic paladin, who sings and plays again. He tells the tales of glory and weaves a magic story. He'll join you at your table and ask you to share a fable. Heroes of humble origin, villains who must be fought again. No matter their skill or prowess, the people in life are countless. So we pray you heed our request. Enjoy this tale of sidekicks and side quests.
Episode 149.
Irythil,
The Thri-Kreen Muckraker. Welcome to Sidekicks and Side Quests, the Dungeons & Dragons podcast that helps to put humans back into humanity and breathe life into your campaign NPCs with backstory and bravado. That's right, we're building a world, one character at a time. I am your host, Kurt Krenwelge, the Bardic Paladin, and I'll be joining Mandie Greenie's table in the levitating platter.
hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Sidekicks and Side Quests, the best unofficial Dungeons & Dragons podcast in my humbly biased opinion. I have an awesome guest for you this month because, this season 6 we're doing monthly episodes, so this will be the June episode. So before we dive into the episode this month, I have to do it. I have to leave you in suspense with the ad read.
This podcast is brought to you by Plus One EXP and their brand new RPG Zine Club. It's a golden age of indie and small press RPGs. For the last several years, Plus One has made it our mission to help new indie creators and small press imprints get their products onto tables worldwide. Our highest goal is to create more sustainable and equitable pathways to getting games made and played. Now we want to take on our most ambitious project yet with RPG Zine Club. What is RPG Zine Club? It is a monthly membership subscription service featuring fresh zines from emerging and expanding creators across the globe. It's our way of inviting GMs, players, and zine lovers everywhere to invest more intentionally in the creative community. It's crowdsourced support without crowdfunding. Now, what are some of the features you have to look forward to when you join the RPG Zine Club? Well, you've got monthly releases with 2 20 to 44 page saddle stitch zines. Take your pick from story zines, adventure zines, or get both kinds. You can get print and digital or digital only of your favorite titles. Join the Clubhouse Discord. It's a section of our online community for club members to discuss and play new titles. Get the best prices guaranteed. You can select your frequency of how often you'd like titles, and you can get what you want and only get what you want. If you miss a month, there's no worries there. You can add recent titles to your month's order and get an annual surprise each February after your first anniversary. Get access to special content, including interviews, how to play videos, and special content for Zine Club titles. Do you like free pizza? Fill out one of the RPG Zine Club passports and redeem it for free pizza at events. You're going to get to encounter new and known designers. We source the best voices from across the RPG design community. We curate zines based on community interest and feedback to help you discover your new favorite creators. We are DIE focused. Plus One is committed to champion diversity, inclusion, and equity in our projects. Creators with diverse experiences make our community better. Zine Club prioritizes creating equity for all of our creators. And it's more than a purchase. Your subscriptions will let us invest more heavily in our print partners and provide them with potentially life-changing support by consolidating scores or hundreds of purchases as the club grows. So, if you want more details, please be sure to go to the website rpgzine.club. And this all can be found also by going to the website plus1exp.com. On that website, if you're making a purchase for a beard balm, a lip balm, beard RPG, or whatnot, and you're looking for a code to use at checkout, be sure to use the code Randolph, RANDOLPH, and save some coin on your purchase. Again, the website to get the discounts from me and provide a kickback to me to help support the podcast would be plus1exp.com with code Randolph. And be sure to go and check out the brand new rpgzine.club.
All right. now that all that is out of the way, I turn the microphone over to my guest and I ask, hello, mystery contestant, would you care to introduce yourself? Tell us who it is that you are and what is it that you do?
Hi, I am Mandie Greenie. I am a online and IRL dungeon master I'm a forever DM actually. I'm an IRL bard cleric. So I work in the nonprofit sector in real life, but I am a huge extrovert, which led me to TTRPGs. And so I am here for some side quests and sidekicks.
Awesome. Yes. I likewise, am involved in the nonprofit area as well in my day job. And then of course, yeah, I'm kind of definitely more of an extrovert than an introvert. And so when I discovered D&D in college, I was like, oh yeah, this should be my hobby. Forget about, well, I am getting more into charcoal grilling. So there is still hope for me to get obsessed over that. But
That sounds like a real dad thing to do during the summer. So it makes
indeed.
sense.
Yeah. So the memes that are like, oh, when men hit a certain point, they either get really into World War II history or they get into smoked meats. I opted for D&D, so that's the thing I decided to hitch my wagon to, as it were.
Sweet.
Yeah. And so Forever DM, I can likewise sympathize. I don't get very many opportunities to be a player, but I am quite the world builder at this point, I would say.
That is always the best part of being a DM. Even if you're just building the world in the moment with your players and it evaporates by next session, it's still just the absolute best part about being a DM.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. And the collaborative storytelling and world building and remembering where's the place I wrote that note down. It was in some little spiral bound thing. And now,
100%.
yeah,
100%.
yeah, I'm pretty sure in this closet over here, I have like DM notes that would be helpful for some of the games I'm running right now. So it may behoove me to, go dive into some old closet and find where I put old notes that would be helpful to me now. So my players aren't like, where's this place? What's that thing? And I'm like, trying to remember it all, scrolling through a Google Doc, trying to
Oh, that's
find.
the worst. I have no idea where half of my ideas come from, much less half of an idea where they end up. And then at the end of a session, I'm like, wait, what did I say? Because so much of what we do in Dungeons and Dragons is improv. Yes, the dice tell a story. Yes, it's super fun to have stat blocks and pre-made characters, and you have all your basic numbers. It's just happy, shiny math, that we do. But the other half of it is complete improv. So we have this sense of building together. And, in my studies in real life, I, studied some religious stuff. And in that, there are these ways of studying, sacred texts and things like that, that is called cooperative overlap, where you're building on an idea together and you're reaching a conclusion together. And so the whole point of the going back and forth and the discussion and the really intense and sometimes very emotional outbursts that you can have in the middle of this overlapping, experience that you're having together around a table, it really does resonate when you're here around a Dungeons and Dragons table, because you don't know what you're walking into 99% of the time. And that's what's making it so fun.
Yes, and going back just a little bit only to kind of lead into, well, how did Kurt get this awesome guest this week? One of the many new social media platforms that the TTRPG community is working to try and rebuild its shared digital marketplace public forum space was on Threads. And
Yeah.
I saw this lovely thing that you were doing where you were inviting people to like, hey, why don't you share like a photo of yourself, and then I will introduce you. I'm only looking at the photo, and I'm just going to introduce you how I would introduce an NPC in my game.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things to do on Threads. It's one of my favorite things to do just in general. Because every time you see someone, you have an opportunity to absorb them into your mental eye. You know, every face that you see in your dreams is a face you've seen in existence. So your brain can't make up new faces that don't exist. And
Hmm.
so every time I see someone, I specifically take their face and I try to put it in a collection and say, okay, so how would I introduce that person? What would I make them? Are they a shopkeep? Are they a bartender? Are they a guard? Are they all of these things? And I like to kind of categorize people in my brain so that I can, when I'm around the table and have to improv one of those things, I can just pull it out of my brain and say, oh yeah, I have this person in mind that I saw last week. That would be a really interesting, you know, NPC to see in a new environment.
It's very cool. It's, I'm sure many dungeon masters out there, both in the famous actual plays and just, the podcast and whatever else. I'm just, for example, I'm thinking of like Dungeons and Daddies talked about like, oh, David Boreanaz was like a
Yeah.
major guard in the town, or other. I know, for example, I was just talking about this in our last episode that we had for last month with Britt Anderson, how I came up with this idea of like, oh, there's a moon elf cleric, but I wanted the moon elf cleric specifically to sound and look and talk like Werner Herzog. So I did have to use Chat GPT just to help me craft some of the dialogue because I know he speaks very nihilistically and existentially, and it's like, I'm not that kind of way in real life. There's no way I can do it justice. So I got clearance. I talked with my player
Yeah.
to give him a heads up to be like, hey, I am going to use this thing to help. I'm going to use this tool to help me in order to craft some believable lines. And the tool did its job and made some very awesome and believable lines. And I could just imagine Werner Herzog, but he looked like a bluish tinged moon elf cleric and was just saying these
That
very
is amazing.
existential sort of things that the characters were interacting with. So,
Well, one of my favorite NPCs I ever made was based on a baker from Great British Baking Show. And he had this like really strange cadence, and he had this voice that was kind of in the back of his throat and like this really northern accent. And I was just like, I can do something with that.
mhm.
And that's one of my favorite all-time NPCs I've ever made, and my tables have adored it. So
Mm.
it's one of my favorites.
So again, kudos, and it's a good skill to have and to use. So yeah. If you do it with like everyday people that maybe you're not necessarily going to interact with, it doesn't come off nearly as strange. If like you go to your
True.
grandma and you're like, Grandma, I'm going to put you in my D&D game, and she's like, that sounds weird. I don't know if I'm okay with that. But don't worry, Grandma, you're going to be someone cool. Like I would never make you someone bad or awful or weird. Like you're only going to be a cool person or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah. I totally did that with my mom. Just made her an NPC because she's a little bit on the neurospicy side. And so she
Mhm.
just makes like a really interesting person to talk to. And so I was like, all right, Mom, you're going to be an ASMR, just letting you know. You're going to be an ASMR, NPC in this town. And she's like, I have no idea what that means, but I'm glad it makes you happy. And so, yeah.
Cool. And so, again, certainly thank you for I threw up a photo of me from Dallas Fan Expo, and then you wrote up a very nice little brief on me as I was
Oh,
like a
thanks.
shopkeeper, I believe is how you
Yeah.
classified me. Okay. Yeah, so that was nice.
Yeah.
So,
You give off shopkeeper, wanting to help kind of vibes. So
okay.
it's cool.
Well, I do bill myself at least the persona for the podcast as the Bardic Paladin. So I get, it's close enough. So I'll take it.
I love it.
Yeah. And I think we've danced around it, and it's a pretty easy segue. But do you currently, or have you ever played Dungeons and Dragons before?
No, never. I'm kidding. um, yeah, absolutely. I play at least once or twice a month, depending on where I am hosting. I do a once a month ladies' night at a pub. I'm setting up a once a month at a coffee shop locally here in the DFW area. And I am just starting some intro to D&D campaigns on Start Playing Duck Games. And
Ooh.
then I have some online friends, some other DMs that I absolutely adore, that are personal friends of mine that I just show up on their Discord every so often, and I'm just like a guest player. So I like to stay in it at least like once a week, but it's not my all day every day because I am a mom and I'm a full-time working mom and I have a family business to run. So this D&D is definitely like my downtime activity and it's my
Mhm.
self-care activity. And my husband and I both play together, and we like to use D&D in our everyday lives. So there are some times where I'll be like, hey honey, can I get this really expensive makeup thing at Ulta? And he'll be like, roll for it, babe. And I'm like, I'll literally, I have dice in my purse and I'll just take out a D20 and roll it flat with no mods. And I'm just like, well, I got a 14. He's like, that's fine. Your DC was 12 and you get a +2 for being my wife. So it works out. And I was like, cool.
Only a
So
+2? You don't get like a +5 or something like that?
no, unfortunately, you get a +2 because we've only been married for about a year and a half. Well, we're
Oh.
going on 2 years now. So once you hit like past the honeymoon phase of like 12 to 18 months, then you can start to increase your modifier over time as you level up. But
Mhm.
yeah, so that's our brain. That's the way we think about it.
Okay. All right. I like that. But yeah, my wife and I, oh goodness, we're getting closer to the 10-year mark at this point. So
Oh, bless
yeah,
you.
she's probably ready for a level up on that modifier. So
Amen. You should
yep.
give her a plus. You should have +1 for every year of marriage. Haven't hit 2 years yet, so
Yeah.
there you go.
Wonderful. Okay, so yeah, playing the D&D. I know I also have started on start playing dot games a little bit. I've been trying to do this one-on-one D&D sort of game over like Discord or Google Docs, but I do hopefully I'll discipline myself to sit down and maybe try and run like some actual one shots because I would love to get some practice in because as you were saying, oh, you organize all these games around the DFW area. Are you familiar with FateCon?
I had just moved here a couple of years ago. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just heard about FateCon this year.
Okay.
And so I have some contacts who do D&D there and do D&D at the various Comic-Con style things. And so
Mm-hmm.
they're like, "Okay, Mandy, you got to get with us for
Yeah.
for this year's cons." And so yeah, I'm working on integrating myself.
Okay. I was going to say their forms are open now. So if you want to apply for a DM or a panel, they're open.
Fun.
And certainly if you wanted to attend, I mean, I'll be making my way there as well. So hopefully we'll have an opportunity to meet and hang out in person.
Absolutely. You got it.
Yeah. And so the name of this podcast, it's Sidekicks and Side Quests. We like to focus on the other, the background actors, the people that really help sell the scenes of our games. So
Yeah.
do you happen to have a favorite NPC or sidekick character, whether they be from an RPG, video game, movie, film, television, etc.? And why is this character your favorite sidekick or NPC?
So I have a couple of answers to this question. In terms of like video games and such, I've been playing a lot of Baldur's Gate over the last, year or so. And
Mm-hmm.
for whatever reason, all of the animal NPCs have really captured my heart. It's so it's so strange to be like, I really want to talk to this toad. I really want to talk to the ox. I really want to see what the squirrel has to say.
Mm-hmm.
And it because it's such a like foreign thing for us, in real life where we're like, oh, I don't actually talk to animals, even though I know there are people who are very, resonant with, our furry friends. I can't understand what my 12-pound Shih Tzu has to say 99% of the time. And, unless she's barking at me for food, which, I understand at this point, that's the one
Mm-hmm.
word we can communicate. But when like the strange ox where this guy that just got, spoilers, there's a guy that got turned into an ox and he pretends to be an ox for a really long time and you have to like do this whole thing. And so I think that, when it comes to side characters, it's the little characters, it's the little tiny like environmental add-on characters that I love the most, because I can kind of get lost in them and I don't feel the pressure of having to like, I don't know, people, if that makes sense. Because sometimes when you're like, oh, here's another NPC with another quest, with another, like, I have to make a decision whether or not I'm going to take it. I have to like listen to all their dialogue. And like, if you're in something like Baldur's Gate, there's a lot of them. There's so many like little things and little conversations to pick up on and all of this cacophony. And sometimes it's just the tiny itty bitty characters that can really make a game. And I'm a wholehearted believer for like tiny sprites and, all that kind of stuff.
As someone who finally, again, with birthday money, thanks mom and dad, able to get a new Xbox Series X. And then the first thing we got, specifically for the Xbox Series X was the $79.99 digital version of Baldur's Gate 3. So my wife and I have been trading off back and forth with playing it. So I now can understand the answers that people give when they're like, I love Scratch. Or I love
you gotta love Scratch.
Yeah, gotta love Scratch, or you gotta love the owl bear cub that shows up. Or yeah, you mentioned the strange ox. Yeah, definitely. I remember the first time going to the Emerald Grove and I had my version of Duncan from the podcast. He's the playthrough I'm doing right now. So the chaotically good adventurer for hire guy. He had taken a potion of animal speaking, and so going around the grove and first meeting Volo, he's talking to a bear, and it didn't click with me until because at first I thought, oh, it's a druid as a bear talking to Volo. Then I realized, oh, I drank an animal speaking potion, so I understand what the bear's saying. Like the bear's trying to tell Volo, like, I came here from a long way away, and then Volo's just like and he's drawing like pictures of the bear eating and decapitating someone. He's just like, this fearsome creature. It's like the bear's just there was no option for me to just be like, Volo, the bear's trying to tell you where he's from.
Yeah. I love those moments so much. And they make the environment so much more engaging. And it also engages more of the fantastical side of things. Because if you like with Critical Role, if you have a sword that suddenly starts talking to you, or if there's fantastical things in our TTRPGs that really bring us deeper into the experience. And I think that like tiny animals and tiny fey creatures suddenly coming up to you, or even like flowers talking to you, or vines having something to say, or some kind of sentience outside of human beings, I think that that's very appealing for side characters. And so I like to do that with awakened items in my games. Like I've had awakened trees where the bard, of course, seduced the tree and then somehow became a cleric of the tree. And her name was Lorraine. He named her Lorraine, and she became an archfey tree. It was spectacular. And so like there are so many ways to kind of expand your world just based on one tiny little thing in the environment. And that's one of my favorite parts about all this.
And I think that has also been a truth that has been reiterated and explored many times in this podcast, certainly.
For sure.
Yeah. And to go along with it as well, don't want to leave out the second half of the name of the show. What's been a favorite side quest or B plot element that's really stuck with you, or is your favorite? Again, same criteria of whether it's a RPG, video game, movie, film, television, etc. And why is this side quest or B plot element your favorite?
Well, I think that my absolute favorite B plot, and it's not even B plot, I think it's actually C plot, is from Lord of the Rings.
Ooh.
And Lord of the Rings, the entire plot of Merry and Pippin with the Ents is pretty much one of my favorite kind of side quest, quote unquote, type of things,
Mhm.
because it's not trying to get the ring to Mordor.
Mhm.
It's not trying to restore Aragorn to his rightful throne and save, the kingdoms of men. It is literally two tiny hobbits, two halflings, trying to talk to some awakened trees and trying to get them to kind of come along for the ride and save their world. And so often we see main characters and heroes, needing to go get, fetch quests and, unite them and get the item that's going to, turn the tide and, do all the things that's really going to make a dent in this battle, blah blah blah. And when Pippin and Merry are with the Ents, it is so unhurried and it is so lackadaisical, from the hobbits themselves. It doesn't even feel like it's a pressing thing until the Ents actually get mad about it. And then everything changes. And
Mhm.
so little like, again, as Lord of the Rings is one of my absolute favorite series, it's one of my, foundational nerd fandoms. I was that girl in high school that wrote all of her notes in runes, in Elvish runes, and spoke Elvish at every turn. Like, I was that girl. And so my friends would get notes from me like, Mandie, what does this say? And I'd be like, you don't read Elvish runes. What about Dwarvish runes? Do you need to speak the Dwarvish runes instead? And I was just so, anyway, side story. Again, hey, we're on side quests. So hilarious stories from Mandy's childhood. So again, Merry and Pippin are such small players at that point that you're thinking, well, why am I reading? Why am I reading another chapter about these two hobbits that just want to get high and on pipeweed and just want to eat and they just don't want to die? Like that, those are very simple quest items. Don't die, find food, and get high. So, you're seeing this hilarious turn in that where they actually become real heroes of the story, and it's just such a great moment. And so that is one of my absolute favorite, side quest kind of things, because any side quest can turn into a main quest, if the circumstances are right.
Yeah, very true and great answer. I loved it, and certainly, not to toot my own horn or do too many own self plugs in the middle of a episode, but the second panel that we did on Catholicism, Tolkien Catholicism and D&D, where I
Oh,
had
love it.
no, I had Dr. Holly Ordway and Alexi Sargent and Catherine on, and we had a great time nerding out about Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and how all that and Tolkien's faith all just kind of melded together to influence D&D as a whole. So
Absolutely.
great
Absolutely. That's
episode
a
if you haven't
that's
listened
a
to it.
whole topic I could go off on for another 4 hours, but we don't have that time because we have other things to do today.
You're right, we do. So, make sure you check that episode out. All you new listeners of the podcast, dive back into the back catalog. The whole point of this thing is that, these are all NPCs that you can use in your games tonight. So we got plenty of them to choose from. Well, Mandie, the way that we round out the personal interview section here of the podcast is we ask the question, what are you passionate about and why?
That's a really good question. There are so many layers to it. I'm really passionate about, personally, on a personal level, I'm really passionate about people being kind to one another and being compassionate in a way that kind of overrides our inherent anxieties and our inherent fears of one another. Which is why I love doing intro to D&D classes and sessions and campaigns, because so often there are people who are like, I really want to do this fun thing, but I have no idea how to do it. I don't have any of the tools. I'm scared, like absolutely out of my mind, of making a fool out of myself in front of a bunch of other people who probably know more about what they're doing than I do. And then on top of that, I don't want to do the wrong thing, and I don't want to mess it up, and I don't want to ruin anyone else's game. And so for years and years, I've been that internet mom friend. Like even before I had kids, I was, a morale officer in various role play guilds. And I was, the crew mom and all of those things. I was a cast mom at 17, because my little brother was in the play in his own high school. So like I've been that mom friend for a really long time. And I think that people genuinely just want someone to care and someone to be kind to them in their moments of insecurity. And that's part of why I love D&D. And when I can stand behind the DM screen and work with someone's unsure, like they're like, I don't know what I want to do in this moment, but I want to do something. And then I can be like, okay, well, you could do X, Y, or Z. And if you do X, this is what'll happen. If you do Y, this is what'll happen. And if you do Z, this is what I'm going to ask for. And these are the consequences therein. And so but doing it in a way that's like genuinely kind and genuinely true to my nature as a compassionate and giving person is something that I am discovering is kind of rare on the internet sometimes. I think there are a lot of people who are obsessed about being right and obsessed with being like doing things the correct way and doing it in a way that like I'm not a rules lawyer. My husband is a rules lawyer. That's part of why we are so good together. When we're in campaigns together, he'll be like, babe, that's supposed to be at disadvantage. And I'll be like, you know what? You're right. But I'm the DM, so I'm going to decide this is the way this table rule is going to go. And he'll be like, okay, fine. And then by the end of it, we're all having fun. And then there are other times where he reminds me of things and I'm like, oh, you're absolutely right, because that will make this game way more fun if I do it according to the rules. And so I'm super duper passionate about that. But one of the other things I'm super duper passionate about in terms of gaming, in terms of allowing people to have a space where they feel free to be creative and to make mistakes and kind of play out their choices. I love like putting together situations that are so abstractly absurd that it takes someone out of their nerves in order to face it. So I love coming up with stupid puns and weird voices and, hilarious circumstances and all of those things in order to make it possible for players to kind of lose themselves in the moment and have this momentary reprieve of whatever's going on in their life, so that they can feel that, that sense of accomplishment, even from the safety of their own homes, behind their computer screens, or, at the pub, people are drinking, they get their spritzers, they get their IPAs, and there's a safety in that for them. And I get to, pull them into a fantastical, magical world full of giant ducks, or, goblins that want to learn how to read, or, 3 kobolds in a trench coat who were secretly a throuple and ran away from their clan because they were ostracized. It was hilarious. And so, but all of those things cause moments of laughter and release of tension. And so as a gamer, that's super important to me. And I like to do that as best I can in my world building and my NPCs, which is why we're talking, because I love creating NPCs that, you know, have the opportunity for depth.
Indeed. Well said answer. I don't no notes. 10 out of 10. Yeah, there
Thanks,
you go.
I appreciate it. I have strong feelings about a lot of things.
Yeah. It's good. It's good to be, strong on the feelings, not lukewarm. You got to be like all in on something, make
Absolutely.
a choice. Yeah. Perfect. Well, now that we've concluded the personal interview section of the show, now let's head into some NPC creation. And NPC creation is brought to you by you, the podcast audience, and our patrons from Patreon. So now's the time in the show where we give a shout out to our comfortable patrons and above with a loud hurrah. So to you, Katie Downey, aka Goblin Katie, our queen of the Patreon, as well as our other wealthy tier patrons, Anson Jablinski and good old mom and dad, we say cheers with tonight, this month, with a can of orange cream Coca-Cola. It's like a dreamsicle Coca-Cola. It's good.
Very nice.
I'm not sponsored by Coca-Cola, but hey, if Coca-Cola is looking for weird niche D&D podcast to sponsor, now's your time. So all these folks I mentioned donate at least $2 or more a month. Everyone I named is at least a wealthy tier level patron, which means they get to introduce an element of chance to our random tables that we have here in NPC creation, and we might get to hear some of their responses used today. So if you want to learn more about all that we have to offer and all the things that you need to encourage me and remind me to catch up on, because hey, I'm a mortal man and I'm doing my best, you should just go to the show notes below, go to the podcast website, or just go directly to patreon.com/sidekicks and sidequests to find out more about our tiers of patronage. Help us to grow and expand our operations here at the Levitating Platter in this demi-plane and worlds beyond. Okay, so now is the point of the show. Aforementioned, we get to make up a character, and it sounds like you've got your dice at the ready, and we're going to just randomly roll up and make up a character and see what we get.
Always. The question is which dice to use. As a dice dragon, as my husband likes to say, I have an exclusive hoard of purely pink dice. My Discord name is Pink Bardic Inspo, and so I have a pink dice collection that could rival Laura Bailey's. Let's be honest.
Ooh. So, fighting words. You heard it first.
If she shows up, I'll consider it a win.
It's like a wrestling thing. Laura Bailey comes out of the wings.
Yeah, she's the John Cena of my life, for sure.
With the chair. Oh no.
Bring it on.
All right. Well, the first question we have to ask ourselves is, what is going to be the name of our character here today? And the way to determine that randomly is with a roll of a D20.
All right. The dice can be up to you. Should we go metal, sharp edge, or elvish resin?
Elvish resin.
You got it. It's pink.
There we go.
All right, we've got an 8.
8. Okay. Your answer was provided by previous guest Dylan, co-host of the Kill Every Monster podcast.
Ooh.
Irythil. Irythil, which is spelled Irythil, and it's pronounced Irythil.
Yeah, Irythil.
Okay.
Cool. Bring it on.
All right. The next question we have to ask is, what is the ancestry of our character? And we're allowed some dice rolls. Maybe we get a response that you're just like, I'm not feeling it, or I don't know how it would work. But
hey,
this will roll a 2d10 for a d100 effect.
All right, let's pull them out. Dose D10. Well, let's look. What do we got? All right. I got a 3 and an 8.
Okay. That would be Thri-Kreen or a Crow, which is like a Ravnica version of a Thri-Kreen. We've had several Thri-Kreens featured on the podcast, but those, of course, for those not in the know, those are the mantis-like people, the bug people.
I love a bug person.
I think they originally came from Dark Sun or Eberron, and then I think it was Dark Sun, and then for fifth edition they were introduced when they did all the Spelljammer stuff.
You know, we could make this akin to an orchid mantis, which is a very fun representation. They're much more colorful than your normal mantis type of thing. So, if we wanted to go with the Thri-Kreen, we can make it a little more whimsical.
True. Or, just for fun, since you had the numbers there, if I reverse it to an 83, oh, that's also that literally the last episode we had a troglodyte. So I was gonna say, yeah, I mean, if you want to stick with Thri-Kreen or if you want to re-roll, that's fine. You're the guest.
Let's stick with the dice. The dice have a story to tell, and I'm here to facilitate it. So let's just stick with the dice and see what happens.
Okay, then Thri-Kreen is the answer, or Crow. I looked through all the books that I had, and I just know that in the Ravnica book, they had something called a Crow, which is like pretty similar, but probably marginally different somehow. I'd have to Google it and figure that out. But okay, so Thri-Kreen, and again, the name as I review it, Irythil, the Thri-Kreen. Okay, the next thing we get to roll for randomly is what is the job or role in society that Irythil has, and this will be just a regular D10 roll.
All right. All right, D10. Let's try it one more time. We're looking at a 2.
A 2. Okay. Your answer was provided by our Patreon supporter, Nicholas Cardarelli of the Raised on D&D podcast, a muckraker.
Ooh.
So Irythil's a bit into muckraking.
Hey, a bug's got to do what a bug's got to do, man.
It's a bug's life. All right. There we go. And now the last bit of dice rolling before we take a pause on it for some other questions. What's the age range of the character? This we determine randomly with a roll of a D8.
A D8. All right. Bring it on. Come here. That would be a 4.
A 4 would be adult. So we have an adult Thri-Kreen named Irythil. That's a muckraker. And with all these details in mind, when you picture these aforementioned details, can you describe the physical appearance of our Thri-Kreen?
Well, if we are basing it on an orchid mantis with a name like Irythil that has a little bit of a harkening back to our Tolkien conversation, the Elvish for moon is Irythil. And so if Irythil is the name of our muckraking Thri-Kreen, I'm thinking we are someone who works at the muckraking during the evening hours and tends to be a little bit on the pale side. So let's go with, a ghostly white tone to their carapace with some violet edges on their, face and antennae and little pinchers. And let's just start with that kind of twilight moon-esque coloring. Let's go there.
Okay. A moon-esque colored Thri-Kreen that's, based off this orchid mantis. That's pretty cool. Just in my head, I know the job is muckraker, and again, if you go on the interwebs and you look it up, it's going to refer to that progressive era of the U.S. from the 1890s to the 1920s, about reformed-minded journalists. But of course, this is typically a medieval fantasy land. Is Irythil literally a journalist that's more involved in sensationalism of like a major metropolitan area, or are we taking it most literally and she literally is raking around muck, like sort of like cleaning up after livestock or the horses or whatever. I don't know, which angle are you wanting to take it more?
I think it makes a little bit more sense if we're talking about an NPC with, something to dream for, something to hope for, something that's a little bit relatable to, let's just say, lower level adventuring.
Hmm.
Um, than someone who is taking the literal aspect of muckraking, whether it's just, raking the road in order to
Mm,
make sure it's clear and leading up to the tavern. And they do that at night in order to keep things cool. There's less travelers. If you're a muckraker, keeping the cities clear or keeping your tiny village, the roads they're in clear, I think that might be something worth doing. And then from there, you have really good openings for meeting your adventuring party.
okay. Okay. All right. Good. And then, so with that kind of more in mind, does that inform anything else about the physical appearance of this character as far as like, oh, is there like a standard uniform? Is there any kind of, tools or implements or accoutrement accessories that Irythil's going to have on their person in order to perform their muckraking duties in this point of civilization that they find themselves
Well, absolutely. I mean, number one would be a rake.
in.
So let's start with our rake. But we should also think about, if they're a muckraker, they've got to have some really high boots.
Mm,
Some really, knee high boots. They are fairly simply dressed because they're, you know, it's a pretty arduous task, pretty physical labor heavy without, needing a ton of strength. It just needs endurance. So I'd say you're probably looking at someone with your standard peasant wear, with
okay.
a set of gloves and some really high boots and their rake, and probably a pack around their waist in order to have some snacking food because you're going to need to keep your energy up, and
Right.
probably a water skin nearby.
And the benefit, the handy thing with Thri-Kreens, having four sets of arms is that two sets of arms can be busy, doing the mucking, and then the others are like, hydrating and fueling up while this is all going on.
What endurance runners wouldn't give for having an extra set of arms? I'm just saying.
Yes, and then their carapace like hides, and so interesting how Irythil wants to keep their carapace clean, so actually does put on a set of boots and gloves and garb and all that.
Well, if you're mucking out the road and you're dealing with the various things that happen to get plopped onto roads, you'd probably want to keep yourself fairly clean, especially if you are that light pale, ghostly white kind of color. It's going to show up pretty well.
True.
And you really, if you're, so that tells us something about Erythritol, that they appreciate a bit of prestidigitation, let's say, on themselves, and they like to keep themselves clean. They like to, and there are a lot of bugs, and I'm just going to say this: there are a lot of real world bugs that spend a good amount of time, especially mantises, especially large-eyed bugs with appendages that keep their faces really super clean. They work really hard to clean their legs and clean their feet. So that's a weird piece of trivia I just pulled out of my head. So yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, and I also like the idea of like, hey, in this line of work, I literally need like a basic cantrip spell, prestidigitation, just constantly is like,
Constant.
yeah, constant. Pew, pew, pew,
Constant.
pew. Perfect. And then let's see. If you had to describe Irythil with three adjectives, what three adjectives would you use?
I would say dedicated, because it takes a dedicated person to keep gumming every single night. Um, and I would say definitely introverted, because they're doing this in the evening. Let's say they do this at night while other parties are sleeping. And then I would say they're probably a dreamer because there's a lot of time left to their own devices. And so while you're doing monotonous physical labor, your mind has an opportunity to wander and, have interesting ideas going forward. I don't know if you've done a lot of, mindless mailroom work in your life, but I have. And there comes a comfortable monotony with just sorting, cleaning, moving, and it allows your mind to kind of wander. And I think that a determined introverted dreamer would be an excellent set of adjectives to use for Irythil.
Perfect. And then, I'm just curious, what sort of environments are we going to be finding Irythil in? Because obviously that, the Thri-Kreen have their origins kind of more in a desert sort of environment. And then with Spelljammer, they got more of an astral sea sort of environment. Or are you imagining like, hey, this is somewhere like Baldur's Gate or Waterdeep or Neverwinter, and, Irythil is like, a very rare Thri-Kreen that's there, and for whatever reason has this job that they do in the otherwise major metropolis, sort of a city that maybe a Thri-Kreen would be very rare to see indeed.
Well, I think that third option is probably what we'd go with because, what is a Thri-Kreen going to do for work? What are they going to do? When you are in your home culture and your home environment, then you have larger options than being a muckraker. Let's just be honest. There's all sorts of things, and every bit of civilization needs someone to do it. That's every bit of dirty work has to get done, and it's dirty for a reason because it takes effort.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that if we're contextualizing this Thri-Kreen as, a lonesome, dreamer kind of person who's just trying to make a living but enjoy their life and move forward. I think that if we're seeing a Thri-Kreen in a place like Baldur's Gate, seeing this, very strange person, this very strange creature in the nighttime hours, just doing something rather mundane, I think that would prove incredibly interesting. It would be very intriguing for an adventuring party who's exiting a tavern 11 ales deep.
Yeah.
Maybe. Just putting it out there.
Yeah, just putting it out there. Perfect. And then now is the part where I say, and now we get to go back to some dice rolling. We like all of our NPCs to have something cool on their person. So what's going to be a valuable item, piece of lore, secret, or ideal or concept that the character would ascribe to? So this is a combo. So we get to roll a D4 for the category and then a D6 for the particular thing.
I love this. This is great. All right, D4 first. We're looking at a 2.
Okay, so this is going to be a piece of lore and then a D6.
Okay. All right, come here, D6. Where did you go? Oh, there you are. A 3.
A 3. Okay. Your answer was provided by a previous guest, Scarlet64. So Irythil knows there's a famous painting that's displayed by a very famous artist, but the painting was done by someone else and the artist stole the credit.
Ooh.
So what do you think about this this particular thing? I mean, is this a thing that she came to, or well, I don't know, she, they, him came to find out about because of the route, especially if they're constantly working outside maybe a particular watering hole, like, hey, you got this route between this tavern and this butcher shop or whatever it is, and so this is your route that you have to clean, and then when Irythil's done, finds themselves always in the tavern and then just happens to know this history about this painting, or I don't know, what are you thinking?
Well, for me, it would make sense that someone who's doing a job like this kind of gets largely ignored. And so when you are a fairly innocuous person within an environment and you're kind of easy to be ignored, people tend to let their mouths run. And so people can pick up on information that may not necessarily have been meant to be dropped.
Mm.
So I think that quite possibly, if you have a route, if you like a paper route, you see a lot of things, you notice a lot of things, you can pick up on snippets of conversation in the quiet evening hours. And I think that it might just be a combination of the two. Because if we combine our two ideas, we can come to this place where Irythil has a ongoing path that they take. And Thri-Kreen are, I'm from what I remember, notoriously hard to gender. So so they will say it's DM's choice,
Mhm.
them, they, or other. And so I think that Irythil probably noticed something was happening, noticed someone was kind of making some remarks to someone else, and might have just followed and tried to listen in.
Okay.
Little bit of subterfuge in the middle of their rather and again, this harkens back to their one of their adjectives as a dreamer. Of
Mhm.
course, they're dreaming for something more for themselves. They're possibly imagining themselves as a spy for their race, or imagining themselves as a vigilante, maybe a pre-Batman Batman. You never know.
Right.
There are so many ways to go with this NPC. And one of the things that I love about making NPCs is keeping them vague enough with enough structure to let each DM and each table kind of make them their own.
Mhm.
And so, as you're listening to this fantastic podcast, dear listener, please feel free to take Irythil and make them your own, because that's the way that it's the most fun.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the idea of this podcast is we give you the resources. I'm horribly behind on doing the write-ups for all the basic info, but essentially if you just listen to an episode and you're inspired, then you can take the bare bones and then run with it for your game on how you think it should be done. Like me personally, if it's not a painting that's immediately present in the tavern, maybe, because this tavern this great hero came and was an artist and and commissioned this great work. But then it turns out that the lesser known rival or whatever, the big hero artist stole it, and he came, he gets his drinks for free in the tavern, and so one night he just had too many drinks and just kind of let it slip before he just mumbled his way to the next conversation. But Irythil remembers what that particular artist said.
And that can be the epitaph for this NPC. Irythil remembers.
Yes.
Irythil remembers all.
Yes. Irythil approves. Irythil disapproves. Yes.
Irythil remembers. And
Irythil
that can be
remembers.
an interesting little thing for your for anybody who uses an NPC, is trying to come up with a phrase or a way of speaking that is unique to that NPC. And even if it's talking in the third person, or saying Irythil remembers
Mhm.
at the beginning of every sentence. There are small things that can add to your, let's just say, performance
Mhm.
as a dungeon master to make these NPCs all the more appealing.
Indeed. Yeah, just, and if the painting's not there at the tavern, we mentioned it was in Baldur's, like a place like Baldur's Gate. It could be that, the famous artist likes to drink here and mentions like, all my famous works are in the so-and-so gallery up in the hoity-toity part of town, and then
Yeah.
lets it slip. And so then if your party's ever going to go there and they're looking for like a little leverage talking
Mhm.
to this muckraker, suddenly the truth behind this big famous piece of art is that it's not really Leonardo who did it. It's really Donatello who painted it, but Leonardo just took the credit.
Great reference.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that.
Yeah. And then, of course, we want all of our NPCs to be able to offer side quests. The whole point of this is to put them in your game and do that. So if you want to randomly generate a side quest that Irythil will be willing to recruit or hire player characters to go and do, you'd roll a d12.
All right, D12. Come here, you. Oh, we're going to use our super shiny sharp edge one because that's the only D12 I have in front of me. And that would be a 6.
A 6. Ah, okay. So this answer was provided by our previous guest, Leah Murray. Okay, so Irythil needs the players to stack the odds of an auction for a particular item in their favor.
Ooh,
Do you
very
think
fun.
that's plausible for Irythil to want to do?
Well, if we tie it back into the lore, we could say that this very famous piece is headed up for auction, and Irythil actually knows that it's not real. And therefore, if the odds are stacked in their favor, they can get this piece for something much, much less than it should be worth to auction. And then they can pawn it off and get out of this city and possibly elevate themselves from the muckraking position.
Interesting. Okay, so going back to the idea of like the hoity-toity part of town, it's a gallery, it's an auction house or something, and so I'm this great hero of Baldur's Gate or whatever, and I had this painting done by the artist so and so, okay.
And then if they hear that painting is not real, stack the odds against whoever might want it and get it for a really cheap price. And then just either resell it, make some money, or make a name for yourself as an actual muckraker in the journalistic way by proving it's not real.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. That's what starts it. There's the lore. So it's like, that Thri-Kreen, that muckraker who ruined me because they dug into the truth behind this.
And then you have an entire new set of professions in your city for a new way to identify between actual muckrakers and figurative muckrakers.
Wow. What a way to tie it with a bow here, right at this question. Okay. So we got the plan, we got the idea for the side quest. So we have to examine both sides. So so this muckraker gets into contact with the player characters. They want them to go to this auction and stack the odds in Irythil's favor, so Irythil can get the painting and be able to deliver the truth or whatever of this. So the players do this. They're successful. They allow Irythil to be able to get the painting and reveal the truth and expose the lies and all that. So what's going to be the reward for the players when they successfully have completed this side quest?
That is a fantastic question. I have a tendency as a person who likes to stack the favor, stack the odds in my player's favor. Mm-hmm. I'm one of those people that's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to give you something fun when I'm here at the table so that you can use it against me. Because there is nothing better for a player than bamboozling their DM.
Yes.
It is one of the highest joys of a TTRPG. So, love the idea of, if for someone who is of lower means, such as Irythil, who's a muckraker, then giving them a voucher or some kind of letter of introduction to a Thri-Kreen, noble or something that says, hey, these people have, rescued me, or, I am indebted to them. Please pay my debt in the form of, a magical artifact of our people, or something that is specific to the Thri-Kreen, that will allow the players to go somewhere completely new, have a completely new experience and a completely new, culture, while also providing them something that will heighten their excitement for the next session.
Yeah.
So, gold is great. Everybody loves gold.
Sure.
You can get gold from any quest. But, passage into a Thri-Kreen colony,
Yeah.
or an amulet of distinction for whatever, something very, very personal that only a Thri-Kreen could give them.
Hmm.
That is one of the things that I wholeheartedly love to see in games, is that if you're going to talk to a specific NPC in a specific situation that is incredibly unique from the rest of the, let's just say, populace,
Hmm.
then what you get as a reward should be equally as unique. So that would be my suggestion,
Yeah.
is some kind of special passage for the party into a Thri-Kreen colony, or like some kind of amulet of friendship for these people, that they're friends of the Thri-Kreen now.
Yeah, for sure. I know the thing. I have the wiki page open here for the Forgotten Realms wiki, and so it does talk about like how Thri-Kreens make their own special weapons. And if I recall from some of our earlier guests, earlier seasons when we've had Thri-Kreen episodes, like I know, for example, Impro, who was the Thri-Kreen tailor, was able, if you did his quest, you got access to a special light armor that was made from the chitin of their exoskeletons. And so
Yeah.
the benefits would be that it was a light armor, but it was more durable, or it had certain protections.
Yeah.
So like that could be like a unique thing, for example. But I do really love the idea of like, again, this analogy of like the Baldur's Gate or the major metropolis where Thri-Kreens are exceedingly rare. Thinking on early Mandalorian, where it's like, oh, the culvert of where the Thri-Kreen are, because maybe Irythil is the only Thri-Kreen that's willing to go, quote unquote, to the surface, above the sewers, and there's like a hidden enclave of Thri-Kreens in the city. And so by doing this thing with Irythil, now you've unlocked the enclave of the Thri-Kreen, and they have like all kinds of cool stuff that you can get.
Yeah, and you can go to an armorer there, and you can, have an introduction. One of the things that's great about TTRPGs is that you can actually just introduce whole new cultures and whole new situations and whole new, essentially, mini worlds to your players with just the introduction of one NPC. And that's, I think, what Irythil can represent for whoever wants to put them in their game.
Okay.
Because there's a whole new world with this species that not many people get a chance to see. Even if your campaign isn't in Forgotten Realms, or it isn't in Space Jammer, or it isn't in, Baldur's Gate.
Spelljammer. Space Jammer is a completely different setting with Michael Jordan and the Looney Tunes.
And Lola Bunny, who is everyone's childhood crush. But Spelljammer and all of those things, even if you're going into, there's so many opportunities to integrate tiny pieces of other campaigns, other settings, by just introducing one NPC and then coming up with something hilariously fun. And you can literally base an entire Thri-Kreen side quest off of A Bug's Life, as we said before. You could have that be the whole quest if you're going to a Thri-Kreen enclave. There's so many opportunities, and that is what is just so insanely fun about this game.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the insane turf wars in the sewers, or wherever these Thri-Kreen are. It's like, oh, the Kenku or the mouse folk, the rat folk, is moving in on our turf, and they're a little mean about it. So now we got to do some politics of negotiating here in the Undercity and make sure no one's mandibles or toes or claws are being stepped on.
Well, stepping on toes is what adventurers do best.
True. And on that note, and on that front as well, we have to consider the opposite. What's going to be the consequence of failure or refusing the call to the adventure? They somehow don't stack the odds, and so maybe Irythil's not able to acquire the painting, or the artist is able to successfully suppress the would-be truth from coming out. Or, the players, find out about this thing, about this auction, and Irythil wants them to help them to be able to bid on this painting because of reasons. I don't know. Like, what's going to be the consequence of failure or refusing the call to the adventure?
Well, I think that I'm one of those people that never wants to push my players into a side quest.
Sure.
I want to give them the opportunity. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, I try not to have dire consequences if they don't take on the quest.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, the consequence of not, of the party not going, oh, okay, well, then this is we'll have to we're just going to pass on this.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably say that once Irythil spills his or her information to the party, that they get up and leave. Like they just leave town because now someone else has their information that they trusted and they didn't do anything with it, which means that the information is going to get out somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's going to get traced back to them. And if we're dealing with hoity-toity folks, then they are most likely people of influence,
Mm-hmm.
and most likely people who can influence authorities to imprison, exterminate, all sorts of things to whatever the source of this information is. And that in and of itself can become another side quest if things go, sideways,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not able to if the party does accept the adventure or accept the quest, but doesn't manage to succeed, then they're going to have to be, they're going to have to possibly see if the artist wants to commission them to go figure out where this information came from. And so it will then become a witch hunt for where this information came from and who's making these accusations. And then from there, it can become, if the hoity-toity people do find out that it was this rogue Thri-Kreen, who has this information, then there's no reason why they wouldn't seek authorities to, put this creature to death.
Yeah, so driving the Thri-Kreen out of the city, thereby removing the opportunity to meet their conclave, their culvert, if you will, going back to the Mandalorian terminology. Okay, yeah, and then you're getting involved in the politics of the city more, because like, hey, where did this information come from? Or I don't know. I'm just trying to think if there's even like a fail forward where somehow now it sparks some sort of like rivalry or intensified feud between the true artist and then the one who took the credit, but that has the more influence or something like that.
Yeah, that's a whole opportunity that your players can entail. And depending on your table, they can decide, well, we're going to persuade the artist that we didn't really mean it, we're just making crap up, we're just trying to start trouble, that kind of thing. Like, you have the opportunity to try and bluff your way out of it and save this Thri-Kreen from getting decimated and hunted down. But if you lose at that too, it's gonna be a bit of a hunt for sure. And one of the things that Baldur's Gate, and I know we've talked about it a bunch of times, but Baldur's Gate 3 really did teach me personally how to be okay with like terminating like consequences of my actions in an RPG, because I'm one of those happy ending for everyone, sunshine and rainbows and everybody gets a unicorn kind of people. And I want to see everybody happy in the end.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, real life isn't like that. But even more unfortunately, our fantasy lives are not like that either. Because while we can make it as fluffy and delightful as we, want, it becomes much more impactful. and much more cathartic for us as human beings when it isn't.
Mhm.
And so I think that the consequence of failing this task, failing this quest, really should end with the end of Irythil.
Mm.
There's just it would be so much more worth it in succeeding
Mhm.
if there was a dire consequence at the end.
Yeah, and I can't help but wonder, again, now thinking more Star Wars related things in Andor, and like Maeve Andor, who does the big speech and basically inspires the town to rise up and fight against the Empire and stuff like that.
Mhm.
If it doesn't serve as some sort of rallying cry, like the Muckrakers Guild is like, oh, Irythil was one of the good ones, and got hunted down in cold blood, and now there's like some sort of big there's manure in the streets piled up high because the Muckrakers refuse to work because of the actions that were taken.
For every action, there is a reaction. For every action, there's a reaction.
Yeah.
And one of the great things about being a DM, and one of the great things about creating these NPCs, is that your players are the ones who determine what those reactions are.
Mhm.
Everybody gets a free reaction each round of initiative. And yes, those are very, dependent on what your feats are and what your class is. But the reality that you can give each of your players the opportunity to react to a consequence that their choices made is such a glorious thing for me. I love that. And there's so many, like, just with this build of Irythil was so happenstance. It's so just luck of the dice, top of the head, very, pull it together, make it happen, make it work, hot glue it kind of thing. In that, we've come up with an entire narrative that could span like 7 or 8 sessions, depending on how your players decide. And I think that is so fun.
Yeah.
I think that's so cool.
Yeah, that's the magic of this podcast, I think. And
I would agree.
Yeah, it's what we try and do here. So it sounds like we've got all the angles covered with the side quests. So do you think there are any optional questions to explore with Irythil, or do you think they're pretty well rounded out?
Well, I think they're pretty rounded out. I think beyond these questions are things that DMs should think of themselves. I'm one of those people that doesn't like to give my advice with all the answers, because there is that, creative high when DMs come up with something either on the fly or in preparation for their sessions that they feel really confident about and can really own. So I think that settling here and settling with this narrative, with this set of things, gives opportunity for someone else to kind of go, oh, well, I came up with this. And so definitely, if there's a comment section, tell us if you use this thing, and tell us if you use Irythil, and tell us what you came up with, because I love hearing that.
Indeed. Yeah. I mean, we definitely have got all the various social media places, and the subreddit is probably the place where you would go to write up your novel about how you used Irythil.
Tell us everything.
Yes, indeed. Tell us everything. We want to know. We're burning with desire to know these answers. So, all right. Well, it sounds like we've got everything figured out, that it's time to throw Irythil into a random encounter.
Oh, no!
This random encounter is brought to you by my sponsor, Zencastr. How do I use Zencastr? Well, that's the service that I'm using right now to be able to record my episodes of the podcast. It's what allows me to capture it all, put it into my editing machines on my new computer to get it processed and put forth onto the interwebs and podcast land for you all to enjoy. I was able to take part of this service all thanks to my buddies Benjamin Huffman and Dane Fox McGraw over at the Dispel Magic podcast. And, if you were at this time in your life wondering what can I be doing? What sort of hobbies or things that I could be branching out to? Well, I'm here to talk to you today about Zencastr. It's so easy. It's now super easy to record a podcast with Zencastr. Log in using your browser and start recording a high quality podcast right away. Record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests. Feel a sense of zen. Knowing Zencastr's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable. You can sound your best. Have you ever wondered what you might sound like? Well, Zencastr's post-production process makes you sound buttery smooth. It automatically works to remove those filler words in your recordings, and it makes those awkward pauses in conversation dip out as well. You can set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with a click of a button. It's all in one, so if you've thought about podcasting before and realize that you need a lot of different tools and services these days in order to do a podcast, well, I can assure you that those days are done. With Zencastr's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast all in one place and distribute it to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code SIDEKQ and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story. Again, go to zencastr.com/pricing, use my code SIDEKQ, get that 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. Thank you so much for listening to this ad and for supporting the sponsor. It helps to support the show. And without further ado, on with the podcast.
All right, so now is the part of the show where we get to do a random encounter, a role play, a scene, a vignette with the character that we've made here today. So I think Mandie's going to do an amazing job portraying Irythil, but the question becomes, who am I going to be in the scene? Am I going to be am I going to be one of my podcast adventuring characters that stumbles upon Irythil and gets this idea for the side quest? Am I another Muckraker that's talking with Irythil? Am I this loud, boisterous artist in a drunken stupor letting slip the knowledge of the true nature of the painting? Or I don't know, what kind of scene are you interested in portraying and showing off Irythil in to give them a life and a voice and a credence?
I think that we should do the scene where Irythil gets the lore. I think we should do it. I think that if we can display Irythil's great, great stealth.
Okay.
Maybe they're in their. If you were to portray the artist just kind of drunkenly spilling his guts to the moon as Irythil slowly follows behind and picks up on all this information, we could make this a grand old time.
Okay. Would you care to set the scene, or would you like for me to set the scene?
Oh, dealer's choice.
You're the guest. It's your choice.
All right. We come upon a road leading into a small village that has a very loud, very boisterous tavern at the end of this road. You can see that there is quite a bit of muck on the road from all of the carts, all of the horses, all of the various livestock that have been brought into the village, brought into town. And with all the adventurers who are passing through, there is quite a bit of muck on the road. And while there is muck on the road, there is a need for muck raking. And in the pale moonlight, you can see a Thri-Kreen. It's a creature you've never seen before. It's a little bit mantis-like in its construction with 4 arms, some antennae, pincers. It's very strange to see in this environment. It's not a creature you've seen before, but it does have this slightly insectoid feel to it. And under the moonlight, its carapace, its slightly hardened keratin outer shell, seems to glow with a pale white, just a pale white color. and with a bit of a tinge of violet, or maybe even just a dusky purple at the edges. And so you come upon this creature in two arms. There is a rake, and then there is at least one other arm just wiping the sweat from their brow. They have gotten rid of the muck closest to the tavern, but they are starting to clear off into the sides, into the ditches near the road, the rest of the muck, so that it can, decompose and help the fields later on. But for now, they're systematically making their way down the street in order to clean it up after a hard day's travel in and out of this village. In the tavern, you can hear voices. There are so many lights. There are so many torches and candles and oil lamps that it seems to be an absolutely glowing beacon in the center of this town. And as you approach, you can see that the doors are opening so often, opening and closing. People are coming in, going out, but there's a uproarious laughter. There is a very slurred speech, and it is at one of these doors opening that we enter our scene.
Yes, thank you. Yes, so I'm thinking that maybe in the spirit of a Volo type character, I said Leonard earlier, and I'm looking at some notes around my immediate desk, and so I'm like, Leonard Morrow is his name. He, a bard, a famous former adventurer bard who became an artist, and so he's kind of an older man, silver pepper, very well coiffed hair and like a very outlandish, flamboyant sort of an outfit. At one of these points, he stumbles out the door and he's like, "Oh, don't you go." He's sloshing his wine goblet around. He's like, "Don't you go anywhere, ladies. I'll be back. I'm bound to win one of these hands of cards soon." And he's like, and he stumbles off away from the door and he goes into the alley because he needs to relieve himself because he's well deep into his cups. And, he, in his state, in his inebriation, he fails his perception check. So he doesn't even notice
obviously
that Irythil is there. And so he begins to, remove part of his trousers and begin to heed nature's call. And he's just like humming to himself and looking up. And he's just like, my fine, fine work. Yes. And then he starts going on and on about this painting that he's talking about, like, yes, my grand masterpiece and stuff like that. And so while this is going on, he's urinating and in all this, and in his own mind and vision, which is hazy and wobbling. What is Irythil doing?
So Irythil, noticing that this very well-to-do painter has come to the tavern, very famous in the town, is kind of a person of note. And so, being the curious dreamer that they are, they approach. And they just kind of slowly, move towards the alley, raking gently. But you hear kind of very quietly in the background as their mandibles kind of click together in kind of a self-soothing type of manner, something that they just kind of do rather mindlessly. It's just a part of who they are. And as they kind of rake near the opposite end of the alley, the Thri-Kreen just kind of gently, ever so slowly, wanders past this painter with their rake, keeping to the shadows, but trying to ostensibly rake out the muck of the alley, since this is regularly a place where patrons have relieved themselves. And in so doing, this Thri-Kreen can obtain an extra copper or two in the morning from the tavern keeper to keep the alleyway clean.
Yes.
So, yes.
Yeah, and he rolls his perception check with disadvantage, and he's totally not seeing this this Thri-Kreen that's going about their business, and I'm sure doing fine on their own stealth check, and he's just letting his mouth kind of run, just being loud and boisterous, and it probably gets to that point as he's like nearing the end of his business. When he just kind of like stares at the wall as he's like, reaching the conclusion, and he says something to the effect of like, and that I couldn't have done it without the blundering foolishness of that Donatello McKinney, thought himself so wise and clever, and he just wasted all his time, didn't even sign his name on the painting. What a fool. What a fool he was to not even sign his own name on this painting, this glorious thing. And all I had to do was just use my wits and charms to slip past him and put my name on it and claim it as my own. He finishes, and he's going to start putting himself together, stretching, burping, and then he looks at his goblet, is like, oh, you're too empty. And those two ladies they were quite sweet on me, and I think I don't want to leave them alone too long. And so he's going to start making his way back into the tavern.
So noticing this, the Thri-Kreen will go,
Sir, your pants are not fully buttoned.
No.
Sir, I don't want to embarrass yourself in front of the ladies you mentioned.
And just kind of sheepishly stick to the shadows, and can be a little.
I think he does fail his perception check yet again. Disadvantage is doing him it's hammering him so hard. He looks perturbed. He thinks like he looks around the alley and doesn't immediately see anyone. He's like, he holds the wine goblet up next to him and he's like, oh, the wine talks. Oh, my dear. Oh, my goodness. And so he works to fasten his trousers. Thank you. Oh, I'm going to have to drink more of you. Maybe you're the lady I'm going home with tonight. And he lets out a boisterous laugh. And then that's when he kind of stumbles a little bit his way. He looks down at his boot and kind of like shakes the last bit of whatever was on it, scrapes it on the edge of the railing of the stairs going up, and then we'll continue on back into the tavern. And so now what is Irythil to do?
I think Irythil kind of just stands there.
Didn't sign his name. Oh, Irythil remembers. Irythil will always remember.
And just goes back to their work.
And scene. So there we go. We did it. So what was it like getting to be Irythil? I know that was like a short, sweet little scene, but I feel like that was pretty much did its job and served its purpose.
I think it was lovely. I think that one of the funny things about NPCs such as Irythil is that I immediately find myself having mantis hands and doing the T-Rex thing. And I think that I know that like physicality is so much of what we do as DMs. And so I think that it was really fun to suddenly like feel the carapace on my back and kind of curve into it and kind of mantis hands. It was a lot of fun. I think Irythil will be a fun addition to anyone's game.
Yeah. Do you think you're going to introduce Irythil into your game?
I very well might. I don't have a session for a couple more weeks, so I have some time to kind of integrate it.
Yeah. There we go. That's what I love to hear on this podcast. I know I make no shame in the fact that I regularly will scroll through this podcast list. I'll be like, who would be someone interesting for my players to meet? And so it's like, so this podcast certainly does its job, at least for me, and how I'm able to introduce some very interesting NPCs into my game that have really shaped and changed some of the tones and tenors of how a game or a session might have gone. So, yeah.
Yeah. So fun. So much fun.
Yeah, so we're here in the final thoughts section of the show. So as the name goes, this is where we, get the feedback on your time being a guest here on the show. And then, of course, if there's anything that you want to mention as far as like any projects or things you've got going on, social medias, if you want to plug those, and passions or causes. But yeah, certainly, this is the final thoughts. So whatever those thoughts may be, let us hear them.
Well, I definitely think that there is such a beautiful place within the TTRPG world for side quest and sidekick focused content. I think that so often we have a lot of emphasis on, world building or magic building or, item building, or finding ways to build the physical things for the players. And of course, every single one of those things is important, but it's in the little things like NPCs and like side quests and like just tiny details that you can actually find spawn points, I guess is the best way to say it, for your stories and for your games and for your relationships with your players. Because there was one NPC that I made at a table, and it was literally his name is Jeremy the baker, and I mentioned him earlier that I based him off of a guy on the Great British Baking Show. And Jeremy talked like this, and he just liked to make bread, and that's all he liked to do. But the way that I made him special was that I gave him a divination rune in his oven, so that when you cut open the bread, it could tell the future if you asked a question while you were kneading the dough. So like the whole Jeremy's entire thing, he had 3 lines of dialogue that he said the entire time, no matter what anybody asked him. And his entire core of who he was, so I make the bread, and I knead the bread, I bake the bread, and the bread tells the future. And that's all he ever said. That was it. And every question they'd be like, so how does it tell the future? So how does this work? Wait, how many questions can I ask? And literally all he said was, so you knead the bread and you bake the bread and the bread tells the future. And that's all he said. And that one moment of my players bursting into absolute hysterics because they could not get a straight answer out of this baker really bonded my players together. Like that was the moment when they had a real connection and a real touch point for their inside jokes and their, shared experience that allowed them to kind of grow together as an adventuring party. And that may have happened during the main story. It may have happened during, the big campaign quests in order to, save the gods or whatever. But the reality was that it was just a baker trying to sell bread. That was the thing that really bonded them together. And in doing what this podcast does, it enables DMs to find spaces and create tiny pockets of situational hilarity where their tables can come together over either a shared moment of hysterics or a side quest that actually, influences them outside of the main quest. So that's one of the things that I'm so incredibly grateful for with this entire thing that you guys do here. And it's fantastic. I'll definitely be going through the archives to find more NPCs for my games because Irythil is gonna show up at some point. So that being said, I'm just grateful that I get to play a part in, allowing people who are adulting super hard to have a moment of respite. And I think that it really is super fun to have a group of people, even if they're halfway across the world and in different cities and in different time zones, all of those things, you get to have these moments of connection that even though our world is deeply, deeply connected through the internet and through telecommunications and TV and all of these things, and the world has gotten so small, human beings are so isolated, and they're more isolated today than they ever have been. And so by having community and having these even small communities at your tables, like, we can influence future generations to have a little bit more courage, a little bit more kindness, and a little bit more creative solution finding and willingness to roll the die on life.
Mhm.
So those are my final thoughts. And I've had so much fun today.
Awesome. Yeah, it's like the tagline of this podcast, of this show. You look in the banner art and it's, we're building a world one character at a time. And I think your answer helped to like encapsulate that in more ways than just the surface level of like, oh, we're literally, we take a character and from there the world emerges, but it's also like, we're building a world and like all the facets and all the mores and the folkways and all these other things. And it all starts from just a single person. So it just, goes back to my philosophy and view on life of like how every human life matters and how much
Absolutely.
better and more richer the world is because you are in it. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So where can we find you online? What projects do you have to plug? And, all that good stuff. And then any other passions or causes that we need to be made aware of.
Well, you can definitely find me on Threads. My handle is Mandie, MANDIE .Greenie, GREENIE, Mandie Greenie. And you can find me on Instagram, but that's just my personal one. I don't do a whole lot of D&D stuff there. Most of my stuff is on Threads. But you can definitely find me on Threads. You can find me on startplaying.games, which is Mandie-Greenie DM. And if you are in the DFW area and you want to come to one of my one-shots, you can feel free to hit me up on Threads. I'm at Tansaffel Pub in Arlington, Texas once a month for their ladies' night, and you can look them up online. And then we're going to be hopefully starting in, I think it's going to be in May. It might be a little later. We're going to be starting a once a month intro to D&D night at Grounds and Gold Cafe here in Arlington, Texas as well. So if you want to come out, there'll be free dice and a whole world of fun. Even if you've played before, even if you have had a bunch of experience with D&D, it's still just fun to occasionally put yourself at a level 1 and roll a dice and make sure that you keep your wizard, who's extremely squishy at 8 hit points, away from the goblins. So that's a good time.
Indeed. Awesome. Well, Mandie, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast and helping me find a new friend here in the DFW area and all that good stuff. And I can't wait to have you back on the podcast, making even more interesting NPCs.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sidekicks and Side Quests. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast through Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Amazon Music, Overcast, or YouTube, or feel free to save the RSS feed to use the app or player of your choice. Visit our website, sidekicksandsidequests.com, for links, write-ups of the NPCs, and to learn more about the show and the guests who have been on it. To stay up to date and interact via social media, you can follow the podcast on Facebook, Instagram/Threads, Twitter/X, and Reddit by searching for Side KQ Podcast. You can also find our small Discord community as well online. I would love to talk D&D and showcase your fan art, stories of how you used our NPCs, discussions, and commentary. And hey, If you'd like to hail the bard and send me a message, an email, you can do so by communicating with sidekicksandsidequests@gmail.com. To help this show be the resource it's meant to be, I ask that you leave a review on iTunes, 5 stars, please, to help spread the word and share our podcast with your friends and family. Whether you're a veteran player or an aspiring dungeon master, there's something here for everyone, and I want to hear about it. As mentioned in the NPC creations section of the podcast, I do in fact have a Patreon for Sidekicks and Sidequests. If you love this podcast and what we're trying to do here, I would appreciate it if you would just go to the website, patreon.com/sidekicks and sidequests. No matter your lifestyle expenses, we have wonderful rewards at every level of Patreon membership tier. Modest, comfortable, wealthy, and aristocratic accommodations await, and we welcome all patrons to the Levitating Platter. Seriously, your financial support allows for this passion project to continue to invest in itself through the tools that will take our production to the next level, as well as provide more content for our patrons and the community at large. Please consider supporting me on Patreon if you can.
Sidekicks and Sidequests is unofficial fan content permitted under the fan content policy.
Meaning I'm not approved or endorsed by wizards.
Portions of the materials used are property of Wizards of the Coast.
Copyright Wizards of the Coast,
LLC.
Thank you for your support, and I'll see you at the pub next time.
Bar to rock on 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sidekicks and Sidequests.